Hey everybody, welcome back to the Follow Lead Podcast, a Christian leaders podcast powered by EBEB Solutions, energy benefits for every business. Go to ebebsolutions.com today and get your free energy audit. Hello friends, episode number two of our 4-part mini-series all about my new book, Wisdom in the Wound, which if you're listening to this on the day of its release, it comes out today. The book comes out today. It's live. It's in the world. Praise the Lord. I'm so excited for this dialogue today. Today, we are going to talk about feelings. That's right, your feelings and how they're real, but they're not always telling you the truth. We're going to talk about the right thing to do with feelings in leadership, marriage, and all the different places. So here's a quick word from our partners, and then jump into my thoughts on feelings. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm so excited today to continue our dialogue on my new book, Wisdom in the Wound, as available anywhere you pick up books. I'm so thankful for those of you that have tuned in for week number 2. There's 2 episodes this week. We're going to talk about feelings this week. We're going to talk about your greatest gift on Thursday. So make sure to hit that subscribe button either on the podcast player that you're listening to or on YouTube. I'm going to read you a little bit of an excerpt from chapter 3 of my book. It starts like this. You just have to sit in it. When my counselor first told me this, I felt an overwhelming sense of frustration and confusion. Sit in it. I didn't even know what that meant. How do you sit in something so abstract, so intangible? It felt like being handed a task with no instructions, no roadmap. At the time, I was desperate for a solution. I wanted to fix the problem, solve for X, and move on with my life. I didn't want to feel those emotions, let alone sit in them. I wanted them to go away, to disappear, so I could get back to my routine and regain some semblance of control. But every time I brought this frustration to my counselor, his name's Steve, by the way, he's excellent, his response was the same. Calm, unwavering, maddeningly consistent. You just have to sit in your feelings. No shortcuts, no quick fixes. Just sit in them. To me, it felt like the emotional equivalent of standing in a burning building and being told not to take action. I wanted to run. I wanted to extinguish the flames. Instead, I was being asked to stop, to feel the heat, and to notice what was happening around me. What I eventually realized was that my counselor wasn't trying to frustrate me. He was trying to teach me something profound about emotions. Emotions aren't problems to be solved. They're signals to be understood. When we try to push them away or numb them, we miss the message they're trying to deliver. Sitting in it doesn't mean wallowing in despair or giving up on finding solutions. It means creating space to acknowledge and explore what's festering beneath the surface. It's about letting yourself feel without judgment, letting yourself process without rushing to fix. The practice of sitting in it is uncomfortable, especially for someone like me who thrives on solving problems and moving forward. But I learned, and honestly still learning, that by avoiding my emotions, I was actually giving them more power. The feelings I tried to suppress didn't disappear. Instead, they festered, manifesting in other ways and pulling me further from the peace I was seeking. Sitting with them, as hard as it was, allowed me to name them, understand them, and eventually release them. This is the deal with feelings. They're everywhere. You're made to emote. Now, you may not emote the same way that I do. You may look a little different. You may not be an expressive extrovert. You may be a pensive introvert, but either way, you have feelings. And no matter what, feelings are just meant to be felt. They're decision points, not decision makers. John Tyson was quoted on my podcast by Annie F. Downs saying that we need to be spirit-led and data-informed. And I think one of those data points is emotions. When your gut has an emotional reaction, you need to pay attention. When you have an emotional reaction, you need to pay attention. And sometimes those emotional reactions are actually signals to something that happened earlier in your life, like your wound. And so when we think about feelings, one of the tools that I give in the book, and I've talked about a lot, is something called the emotional intensity scale. Now, I want you to think of your feelings on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 being meh, 10 being, oh my gosh. Anytime you're spiked above a 6 on the emotional intensity scale, it's always more about you than it is the other person. Anytime you're spiked above a 6 on the emotional intensity scale, it's always more about you than it is the other person. Now, your 6 will look different than my 6. My 6 will look different than someone else's. But the truth is, we all have a 6. And when you bump up against it, when you go over it, that's the signal to say, danger, danger, danger. And it's not judgment. It's not shame. Like, you're allowed to be above a 6. There's no rules that say you can't. It's just more along the lines of, hey, brain, I need to pay attention here. I need to slow down. I need to think. I need to, as Steve said, sit in it. Sitting in your feelings gives you the ability to show up in a certain kind of way, to show up in a way that reflects your values and gives you peace. I have many times in my life acted out of feelings instead of out of intentionality, right? I don't want emotional reactions. I want intentional responses. I want to be able to slow down, take a look around and say, is this the decision I really want to make? And when you're emotionally spiked above a 6, that's not going to happen. The emotional intensity scale is designed to be a tool that helps you lean in to what God's calling you to. When you know that you're above a 6, that's God's way of saying, slow down, pay attention, practice the art of solitude. In other words, put yourself in timeout. When you're above a 6, now's the time to put yourself in timeout. John Mark Comer calls it the practice of solitude, the idea of sitting in your feelings with the Lord intentionally. Part of why we do this is because when we're spiked above a 6, it's really hard to tell what's true. For example, when someone questions my integrity and I lose my absolute mind, and then I begin to create a narrative that the whole thing that I'm leading hates me. Maybe it's the whole church hates me, or this whole program hates me, or I'm horrible, I'm terrible, right? Like, none of that is actually true. One person is upset. I don't have to emotionally respond to that one person. I just need to take it as a data point. If I start to receive more data points, then you change accordingly. But oftentimes, an intense feeling will lead us to a conclusion that isn't accurate. So we have to discern between the truth and the story we tell ourselves. And that requires good disciplines. That requires good people. That requires stepping back from emotions. The role of emotional intensity in spiritual maturity is critical. Jesus was a very emotional leader. He wept before raising Lazarus from the dead. He slept on it before he tossed tables in the temple. He washed his disciples' feet from a place of vulnerability. These are incredibly emotional acts, but they were intentional responses to the situation. They weren't just Jesus flying off the handle. Because I guarantee you that if I go into a temple and start flipping tables, it's not because the Father told me to. It's because I'm having an emotional reaction. Righteous anger only works when we're intentional about filtering it through the Father's will for our life. Taking the time to slow down and ask God, is this what you have for me? Is this what your desire is? Think about the damage that we can do in our marriage and in our workplace or with our kids when we let our mouth lead our emotional reactions. I've done hundreds of hours of counseling, and no one ever wakes up and says, "Man, today's the day that I want to ruin my life." Instead, we just let something slip out of our mouth that we just can't put back. And it's messy and it's gross, and it happens to all of us. It still happens to me. But what I can say confidently is that when I'm operating in my disciplines, my feelings are in the right place. In other words, if you want to get ahead of your feelings and not having emotional reactions, the best thing that you can do is get a good night's sleep. Work out in the morning, read your Bible, pray, talk to your godly counsel. The disciplines around us build us and protect us, mostly from ourselves. Imagine what would happen in the world if the leaders today didn't have emotional reactions and they instead chose intentional responses. Imagine the healing that could happen in our country and in our lives. The truth is, if you're listening to this, you're already interested in feelings, so let's dive a little deeper. When is the last time you had an emotional reaction? When's the last time you spiked above a 6? Did it have something to do with the political landscape? Did it have something to do with somebody who you love and what they said? Once you figure that out, begin to trace that back and ask yourself the question, when's the first time I felt this? When's the first time I remember feeling this angry or alone or afraid or out of control? In that process, you might just find your wound. You might find some of the things that bump up against who you are and how it shows up. And then the other thing that I want to challenge every leader. Do you live a life that has enough space so that you can be interrupted by feelings? Some of the hardest conversations I ever had were with people who challenged my very existence. They would question my integrity. They would oftentimes say not nice things about me. And what I began to learn is the best course of action was to create space in my calendar for after I met with them so that I'd have a place to put my emotions. Bold ones, emotions aren't bad. They just shouldn't be in charge. If emotions are Lord of your life, then Jesus can't be. Feel your feelings. Make good choices. Have great disciplines. It will change your entire life. One of the reasons why this part of personal growth is so important is because we can't shut it off, right? You're not going to figure out a way to go through life without having feelings. So if you don't handle your feelings, eventually your feelings will handle you. Eventually, they want to come out. They will come out. Will they come out in a way that best represent who you want to be? Who you feel like God's called you to be? Who you're striving to be? Well, friends, that's our episode for today. A quick episode on feelings. Our next one coming out will be all about your gift on the other side of your wound. We're going to continue to dive in. If you have any questions, you know I'm embarrassingly easy to find. Tony@twmilt.com. You can also hit me up on Instagram @twmilts. Don't forget to order your book, Wisdom in the Wound. You can go to wisdominthewoundbook.com, or it's available for order on Amazon or wherever you get your books. As always, the highest compliment you can give us, share this episode with a friend. Maybe somebody who you want to talk about feelings with. So until later this week, it was a pleasure being with you today. Thank you for being a part of our community. And remember, if you want to follow Jesus, you must be willing to move.